since you mentioned Street Smart Public Relations, let's talk about that a second.
Shoot.
Okay. In that book, you talked about the 4 R's of PR, which was
Three
reading.
R's, wasn't it?
No, reading, writing, realism, and results.
Oh, okay, I keep making them up differently. Reading, writing, and relevance, I think I would say now.
Okay. Well, what would be tell me about that. Before you had 4, reading, writing, realism, and results, and now it's reading, writing, and relevance. What has happened? Why has that changed?
No particular reason, just as I look at what's going on, I see different priorities. Reading. I don't think today that the people in the business read period or read broadly enough. Oh, they'll tell you they read the Wall Street Journal and Business Week, and that, that's not what it's all about. When I have several times I've been engaged to help a client hire an agency or something like that, and we sit down and talk, and they come in with all their hyperbole and bluster, and I just ask them, what do you read? And it's very revealing. I said, what do you really read? And it's so limited, really. How can they assume any relevance to their counsel to business, which is basically what is the bottom of it, if they don't get into the mentality and the rhythms and the worries of business people? Reading PR Week is not going to help you. Then I will also ask them, tell me when you failed. Do what? Failed. Well, and what did you do about it? Now, at Carl Bayer, that's another thing I learned there. There was no such thing as failure. Obviously, things didn't always work, but that meant that you have to work harder, what we call the second effort. I mean, I have had such things happen as a press conference when the press bus drives up and nobody gets out. Boy, I'm going to tell you, your career flashes before your eyes. But 10 days later or 2 weeks later, we had more publicity in a particular event through other means. Now, in those days, we had, but I guess, I was going to say we had more media to deal with. We had things like the Western Newspaper Union, International News, United Press, but now you have the electronic versions. So I guess it breaks even. But somebody said, I can't quote them, but you have to have some failures in life to really achieve anything. I would add to that only if you look at failure as an opportunity and a beginning, not an end. So writing, I have no patience for any account executive, agency, or in the corporate world who brings in a speechwriter to write the boss's speech. And they do it for 2 reasons. They won't admit it. One, they consider it dangerous because they maybe can't write well enough. And they don't want to expose their weakness. They want to have someone else to blame. But they don't understand that assuming you can write reasonably well, you get into the CEO or whoever the boss's head in a way you could not otherwise. I mean, in the terms of a CEO, when you're doing that for him or her, you become closer to their wife or husband because you are helping them in a moment which they are most uncomfortable at. And if it works, and if you've done a good job, boy, I had early in my career, I got into meetings that I had no right to be in only because he wanted me there because he knew I had the right he wanted me to know about. So how they can give up such a golden opportunity to really establish their relationships with their boss, I don't know. Of course, they will tell you, and I'm sure you'll hear it, how close they are to the CEO, because we have instant access. That's a lot of baloney. There's a difference. I don't deny that they see the CEO more regularly than we did in the early days, or certainly I did when I was a staffer. But the difference between being called in to report, being called in to get an assignment, versus coming in chat to ask advice before something's done, not what you're going to do afterwards. So access has to be really examined, I think. So the reading, the writing, and if you don't do anything that relates to what the company is counting on you to do, if it's not relevant, why the hell are you doing it? One of the chairman I work for says, I'm not always sure what he's doing, but I know he has a reason. I'm serious.
Yeah.
So that's how Street Smarts worked out.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned something. Let's talk a minute about this. Let's talk about your personal philosophy and what you believe are necessary characteristics and qualities for PR professionals. Now, let's start with descriptors that I have found either before your name or following your name or from individuals who are writing about you or whatever. And some of them you've mentioned, and there are some other ones. Curmudgeon.
Oh, yeah.
Elder
Do you realize that
statesman.
Bill Buckley was a curmudgeon? There's a book out, World Class Curmudgeons. Little small book. And among those listed is Buckley, George Will, and so on. So I consider, as a matter of fact, one of the books I'm going to write one of these days, I got halfway done, Curmudgeonly Speaking, it's going to be called. I'm going to try to change the definition of curmudgeon. Which you can't change definition very easily. And the definition in all the dictionaries is along the lines of what you talk about, irritating, contrarian, and so forth, doesn't like anybody. Curmudgeons can't stand hypocrisy. Curmudgeons want to know why. They're not satisfied with conventional wisdom. I think that for curmudgeon, in the context of all the positive things, not the negative. So, yeah, I've been called curmudgeon, contrarian, iconoclast.
You also read an article, I think you spent a lot of time talking about the word why.
Ah,
And he has something. The power of why, yes, okay. Yeah.
why am I doing this? Why am I doing it today? Why can't I do it better? It's a very personal thing. If you adopt the philosophy of that and apply it to yourself silently, you'll do a lot better. Years and years ago, IBM had a slogan called Think. I don't know if you remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the psychology of that always fascinated me because it created, or they hoped it created, and I think it did, the perception that their people were more intellectual than the competitors. Mm-hmm. And they had a magazine, and they had Think all over the damn place. Mm-hmm. I have tried unsuccessfully to get a couple of clients to adopt why in the same context. And then just think about it. You had just why spread throughout an agency. immersion in that three-letter word could be extraordinary.
Absolutely. All right, so let's,
Why am I here?
wow.
Because I may die soon. Hope not.
So, you mentioned that you were an enemy of the status quo and a pronounced foe of conventional wisdom, and you've also been described as PR's devil's advocate. So,
Well, look, I know sooner or later we're going to get to communications, but public relations, in my estimation, is a very flexible discipline because it addresses, and should address at least, a lot of intangible factors which are subjective. So you can't set down formulas. There's nothing pro forma about a good all-around public relations practice. And first of all, it's not a profession. As you know, it can never be a profession until there's standards of entry and discipline for violations, of which we have none. Anybody can call themselves. So and there's too much self-worth among the practitioners. They are not a profession. But you can have principles and standards of performance, but not formulas, I don't think. And that's one of the things that always attracted me to it, because every client and every situation was different, just like the fingerprints of people are different. And you build up a storehouse of experiences, but then you tailor them to what are going on. You don't just change the name in a release, put the client in, but they do. You know, the young people who are now older are getting a pass in terms of intellectual involvement, I think.
well, what
I
can you
mean,
do about
promoting a nudist colony is not exactly what I call public relations. If you read PR Week, which I look at only to keep a finger around, it is all job changes, client acquisitions. There's a philosophy, apparently, that lateral movement enhances a career. I don't agree to that. If the lateral movement involves different responsibilities, there's something to be said for that. But it doesn't usually. And the weakness of it is that lack of stability. I mean, you can get bored in this business, believe me. You have to fight that. I have been bored many times. Part of the reason I've written so many books and articles is out of boredom. You know,
Yeah.
you can't be on all cylinders all the time. So, no, you keep going, you know.
Okay.
Well, maybe we should talk about, this is my new book coming out in the fall.
Ah. Okay.
Communication is a process, and it diminishes public relations. I mean, you be very successful in counseling without actually doing communications as it's defined now. You know, you're just talking to somebody and saying, don't do that. How do you measure advice given and taken to eliminate a problem that does not arise? Whereas if you hadn't given me advice, there would be all sorts of difficulty. That's public relations and may not involve communication. Don't do it. Do not fire people before Thanksgiving or Christmas. And when you go and get a $15 million bonus or whatever. Harold Burson believes it too. He said, the adoption of communications as a synonym for public relations started the business on a slippery slope. And I agree totally. If you go through the page directory, you will find few titles that use the word public relations. These people who are the so-called elite of the field these days go to watering holes of Baker or Ton or Vail and listen to gurus talk about things that they have no involvement in. It's like fantasy baseball. It really is. It is their way of reinforcing their sense of self-worth. But then they go back to their day job and are pushing vitamins or something like that. They're not counseling. And the so-called PR seminar dropped the word PR because it was irrelevant. PR week is not really, it should be communications week, but there is a publication like that. But I think it has two disadvantages, one subtle and one very profound. It encourages senior corporate officers to think of the process as implementation, the public relations process. They don't make any distinction in their mind between public relations and communications. To them, it's all the same thing. It's media work, whatever it is. They never think of it, or rarely, think of it in terms of advice and counsel. The PR people, or the communicators, as they call themselves, are called in after the fact, not before the fact. Everybody communicates. There's no question about that. That broad application of the term to public relations, it just diminishes what public relations is. And as far as the practitioners are concerned, they love the cachet of public relations, but they call themselves communicators. Just look at their titles. It's where they get their kicks, I guess. I don't know. But it's what's going to happen, and that's what I wrote. This book covers the past, present, and what I foresee as the future of public relations. The world is so complex, and we've just read about it every day, that CEOs are going to need somebody at their side who can see the world through a different prism than the accustomed disciplines in a business. I mean, the legal, the accounting, the operational, the marketing people think in the terms of their own discipline, and they can be very excellent at it, but they do not go beyond it. Somebody has to be sitting there and saying, if you do it that way, Chief, you're going to create more problems than you're solving. Why? Well, because. So that's one thing. If the President of the United States has, and has a, I guess always have had, personal advisor to the President for Foreign Affairs, or whatever the title is. They're going to be in need and will be fulfilled by, not by PR people, tell me. Personal advisor to the President on public policy, or personal advisor to the Chief Executive on personal policy. It's going to come from liberal arts graduates, Maybe they can't sit down and write a white paper. Maybe they can't write a big speech. They're going to hire the communicators to do that. But they're going to sit there and ideally they should have no administrative duties because that gets in the way. They should just be thinkers. Leonardo da Vinci supported himself and was successful not as an inventor or a painter. He was a counselor. Princes paid him handsomely just to sit and talk to him. There's a book out, it's not out, been out for a long time, called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And I read it, and it led me to write a book about how to change your job into a career. The author of the How to Think About Like Da Vinci identified 12 attributes of Da Vinci personality, 3 of which applied particularly to public relations. And one was curiosity, which is, you can define it many ways, you know, anti-status quo, whatever, but why? The second was the use of the right brain. And the third was the ability to see an obscure event or read about an obscure event and start to think of it in terms of another obscure event, and all of a sudden a pattern emerges. And people don't like that because you're seeing problems they don't see, or they ignore them, or worse, they deny they're ignoring them. There was a professor at the University of California years and years ago who wrote a paper on this, which I've treasured, and he likened the development of a public opinion to a biological process, awareness, and so on. So I really do believe that, and it's not going to be the current generation of CEOs, because they're still wedded. And it's not going to be the ones that immediately follow them, because they're coming out of the B school who are still teaching models and case histories and formulas. And I don't care if they say that we not put social responsibility in there and all that sort of thing. They are not touching the really roots of what I'm talking about. Down the road, and I'll probably not be here to see it, there's going to be a class of young people coming out of the business schools who are not wedded to that quantitative mentality. And they are going to be liberal arts people. They are not going to be journalists. They're not going to be technological people who are wizards with email and Facebook and all that stuff. They're going to be entrepreneurial, mentally. They're going to be intellectual. And they're going to see problems where others don't see it. And they're going to have really good advice. They're going to be free to do that. I would, if I were starting a company or someone would ask me, I would put a sociologist somewhere at the top. And certainly if I had a decent public relations operation, which would be called that, it would have a sociologist. A good friend of mine is a tenured sociologist at Williams College. He's a little different from most in that he has tramped plant floors more than you can realize. He wrote two books. One was Image Makers, and the other was called Moral Mazes, M-A-Z-E-S. And he studied why employees hear different messages than the brass is sending them. If you think about it, it's a very profound thought. You're going to need people like that. I mean, he and I collaborate. At least we have lunch and blow our brains out equally. And that stuff fascinates me. How do you do that? And now look what we're going through with Mark Penn. You've read about it. The tragedy is that the corporate clients of Burson Marsteller will not see the relevance of the hypocrisy that it represents. It's not that he double-talked and embarrassed Hillary Clinton. He doesn't know. He has no moral background. He doesn't realize the conflict of interest. He doesn't realize what it will do to the reputation of integrity and honesty and truth for Burson Marsteller. And nor does, I've read in the paper before I came here this morning, Martin Sorrell sees nothing wrong with it. I mean, he's not going to change his policy. She says the world is too complex. We have these things happen. He made a mistake. That's true. But he's going to continue to build Burson Marsteller. Martin Sorrell was looking at it as money. He's not looking at it as the reputation of Burson Marsteller. I mean, here's a guy, first of all, he's very unpleasant if you read the papers. He's disdainful of any point of view but his own. He's arrogant, he's smug, what else? The people at the Hillary campaign hate him. The media hates him. And I can't believe the people at Burson Marsteller love him, but I don't know. But he was permitted to maintain his own polling company in addition to being CEO of Burson Marsteller. It would be interesting to see how much business he funneled from Burson Marsteller. Where did the $13 million he got from Hillary go? Did any of it go to Burson Marsteller, or was it all to him? How much is he making in the polling company, and where does that go? And how much is he making at Burson Marsteller? And Martin Sorrell, who is a very bright guy and has certainly made his critics into fans what he's done with WPP, you know, that company, he's a holding company. But he reveals his misunderstanding of what public relations is all about when he is dismissive of the enormity of what is represented in not only Penn's actions, but Penn's attitude. And how can the PR business survive if it doesn't stand up for principle? You talk about the Page principles. You have Fleischman Hillard a couple of years ago, where their highly touted head of their Los Angeles office, who had been a local figure of some political importance, was accused, indicted, and is now in prison for kiting the bills to one of the city's agencies. And in the process of the accusations and the trials and all that sort of thing, you heard nothing from Fleischman Hillard. They distanced themselves from it. Why didn't they stand up? Why didn't John Graham say, God damn it, that's terrible? If I had not, they didn't say. If they had treated a client's crisis communications the way they handled their own, they would have deserved to have been fired. What about Ketchum, another big, once proud company, accused of money laundering? That's what they did. You don't hear it. Why are they silent? You talk about it being a profession. It's not a profession when they can't even stand up and talk about it. You won't hear peep from any PR people about Mark Penn. That is what annoys me and irritates me. Now, the last 8 or 9 or 10 years, I've been well removed from the functional activities of public relations. I'm working much more with the corporate side. I'm on the advisory board of the National Association of Corporate Directors. I'm a director of the New York chapter of corporate directors. I'm looked upon as sort of the director of special programs, meaning that I conceive of a luncheon program that isn't the usual boilerplate that all the governance people do these days. A man by the name of John Bogle, who made a very solid reputation in the mutual fund business, wrote a book about the battle for the soul of capitalism. Very thoughtful man. He's older, of course, so he speaks up. And we had a session on that. To me, that's fascinating. Maybe to others it's pretty boring, but
I doubt that.
who knows? But that's why I write this newsletter. That's another thing I started.
Yes, yes. Okay.
It's bi-monthly.